Welcome to another Gearwig battle report. A 50-point game between Joe's Convergence of Cirrus and Nick's Trollbloods at the Complex in Scarborough, Maine. Joe brought Syntherion's Tier 4 theme force and a whole bunch of warjacks, or vectors. Let's see, he has an assimilator, 2 inverters, a unit of OptEffects directive, a cipher, a monitor, a corollary, 2 galvanizers, a diffuser, and a mitigator. Nick has dusted off his trolls after a year on the shelf. He brought pDoomie, he has Mulg, a Pyre Troll, a Storm Troll, a Bouncer, a Runebearer. He has a full unit of champions. He has the Champion Hero solo. He has the Fenblade Kithkar solo, and a full unit of Fenblades with a UA, as well as a Fellcaller. Joe deploys first. He keeps Syntherion in the center, and he spreads out his heavies to each side of him, like this. Nick deploys with his Fenblades along the bottom, with the Fellcaller and the Kithkar. The entire battle group is up near the center top, with the champion standing in front of them. And the game was played on the Steamroller scenario 2 fronts, where each player has a friendly zone with their own friendly objective inside it. Nick took the stockpile objective and Joe took the fuel objective. Joe's corollary starts the game with a focus thanks to his theme force. He allocates only 1 focus to the galvanizer at the bottom and will use Convergence induction shenanigans to run his whole force. Let's see if he pulls this off. Galvanizer spends a focus to run, and he inducts it over to a nearby vector. The galvanizer ends here. That inverter then spends that 1 focus to run. He inducts it to the nearby cipher. This inverter can't quite get over the wall, these guys are slow. The cipher then spends that 1 focus to run. He inducts it over to the diffuser. All of these robot names are just nonsense to me. The diffuser spends it, he runs. He bounces it a couple bots down to the mitigator. He can give it to any vector within 6 inches. Skips over the corollary. He needs that 1 focus to zoom up that line of vectors and then bounce back down to land on the corollary in the center. So now he's skipping a jack every time he inducts over. The mitigator ends like this. And then the monitor runs. And the second galvanizer runs. He had inducted that focus back down to the assimilator, who can now spend it to run and bounce it down to the second inverter. The assimilator and all the vectors with that hovering chassis have Pathfinder. Syntherion goes next. His theme force allows him to cast his spells for 1 less on the first turn, so he's able to cast Synergy on himself. He can cast Reconstruct on the inverter that hasn't run yet. If this inverter is destroyed, it comes back to life within 3 inches with a few of its boxes left. He then advances and casts Hotshot, an upkeep spell, on the cipher. This causes the cipher's ranged attack damage rolls to all be automatically boosted. This is nice. The cipher has a couple otherwise very low damage roll AoEs that become okay with Hotshot. The inverter spends his focus to run, and he bounces it over to the corollary. The corollary has a focus battery special rule, so he gets to keep that focus next turn. So that 1 focus he spent to run his entire army will still be around next turn. So achievement unlocked. Though to be fair, if the corollary had acted with his Warcaster within 3 inches, he would have got a 3rd focus. So this could be done even better. Room for improvement. The OptEffects directive just run. That'll end Joe's first turn. Nick starts his turn by running his Fenblades. and they end up like this. The Fenblade Kithkar solo activates next. He gives himself and nearby Fenblades the Tactician special rule, which allows them to run through each other. So he can just run through these dudes and land up in the middle. The Fellcaller goes next, and he just runs behind these guys in a position to buff them next turn. The Champion Hero solo activates next. Similarly, he gives nearby Trollkin champions the Tactician special rule. And then the champions run. Nick hasn't played these guys in quite a while, so he forgets about the defensive line. If these guys are base to base with each other, they get +2 armor. But against such a hard-hitting synergy army, the plus armor doesn't matter so much. Mulg runs next. Mulg is by far Nick's most expensive and critical model. He's really the only guy that can crack this robot armor. The Storm Troll runs next. Followed by the Pyre Troll. Doomy then activates. He dumps enough Fury to make room for the Fury that was generated by running models, and then he runs himself and toes into the zone. And then the Bouncer runs. This guy has Shield Guard, so he can absorb some ranged attacks if they target Doomy. And then the Runebearer goes last, and he just runs. And that ends Nick's first turn. Joe starts his turn by allocating focus. For such a hard-hitting melee list, these robots actually have a pretty good amount of shooting. He wants to set up a nice gun line here to slow down the trolls. He allocates one to the Cypher, who had Hotshot. He allocates another to the Diffuser, who also has a ranged attack. The Assimilator gets one too. He has a nice ground pounder AoE. And then lastly, the Monitor gets one. He has a very good single target ranged attack. With proper induction here, it's like all these guys start with an extra focus as well. And Syntherion can upkeep all his spells for free. The Cypher goes and fires an AoE into the Kithkar. He needs a 7 and hits. It's a bombardment attack, which is an AoE 4, where every model under it suffers a POW 6 blast damage roll, but it's boosted thanks to Hotshot. The Kithkar takes exactly 0 at dice -9. At dice -8, Femblade takes damage, but makes his tough roll. The second Fenblade is clipped at dice -8 and takes damage, and this one fails his tough roll. The last Fenblade in the blast takes damage and also fails his tough roll. The Cypher spends his focus to buy a second AoE attack, again at the Kithkar. This attack hits as well. At dice -9, the Kithkar takes 6 damage, but he has 8 boxes. The Fenblade, who originally made his tough roll, is damaged again, but he makes his tough roll again. The Diffuser, who got that inducted focus, now has 2. He advances up to fire his single target shot. He targets the Kithkar. He'll need a 7 to hit and boosts. The attack hits. It'll roll dice -5 for damage and only needs to do 2 damage to kill him, but doesn't do any. The focus he spent was inducted over to an inverter, allowing it to run later. Now a mitigator advances up. He fires his AoE attack at the leader of the Troll Champions. If it hits, they'll all be knocked down. He boosts the roll, needing a 7, and hits. Every target under the AoE is knocked down and suffers 1 damage point. It ends up clipping 2 of them. That focus point was inducted over to the Assimilator, who then advances through the forest. He uses his Ground Pounder special attack to put a 4-inch AoE out within range of his gun. He can make a ranged attack roll against every model under the AoE. He's able to clip all 4 trolls. He starts by attacking the knockdown trolls, just needing not Snake Eyes to hit. The first one hits. He'll roll dice -4, and he'll boost the damage roll. It does more than 8 damage. That's going to force a tough roll for the champion, but he passes it. He attacks the second knockdown champion, and hits. He boosts this damage roll as well, and forces a tough roll. That fails. The next attack roll on a standing troll needs a 7 to hit, and does. This will also be boosted, and does more than 8 boxes, forcing a tough roll that also passes. The attack roll against the last troll also hits. He's run out of boost, so at dice -4 does almost enough to kill him, but not quite. The inverter spends a focus to run, bounces it over to the monitor. A galvanizer just advances. The monitor advances just enough to get some line of sight and takes a shot at the storm troll. He'll boost the attack roll, needing a 7. And just hits. He'll boost the damage roll, and at dice -3, does 8 damage. That last focus was inducted over to the corollary, who's now full up on 3. He advances. He gets close enough to the other inverter to use power transfer. He can spend any amount of his focus to then allocate that amount to the inverter. So he spends 1 to give the inverter 1. And since he spent a focus, he can then induct a focus. He gives this focus to the other galvanizer. The galvanizer then spends his focus to run. This focus gets inducted right back to the corollary, who's back to full. The galvanizer only runs a little bit. Syntherion then activates and advances up. He fires his ranged attack at the nearest Fenblade. He'll need a 7 to hit. And does. He'll roll dice -3 for damage, and force a tough roll. And this roll passes. The Optifex Directive Repair guys run. They get defensive bonuses when they're base to base with effectors. And they end up like this. The last inverter spends his focus to run. Pretty good round of shooting from the Convergence, all while making very efficient use of focus, as they always do. And this ends Joe's second turn. During Nick's maintenance phase, his objective, the stockpile, causes all models within 4 inches to stand up. Pretty handy for trolls. So his 2 champions that were knocked down stand up. Then it's on to vengeance moves. The Kithgar solo gets Righteous Vengeance, so he can move his full advance and then make an attack. He targets the objective and automatically hits it. He'll roll dice -5 for damage and do 3 damage. Because it's the fuel objective, he then catches on fire. The unit of Fenblades can then make their vengeance attacks. Unfortunately, the 2 knockdown ones are not allowed to move, so they can't participate. The remaining members of the unit can each move 3 inches and then make 1 melee attack. None of them are able to get in range of any enemies, though, so they don't make any attacks, and end up like this. Then it's on to the control phase, where Doomshaper leeches in fury to go back up to max. The Fellcaller activates next and advances up to buff the Fenblades. Giving them +2 attack isn't going to do much good, since the defense on these enemy models is so low. He could use Reveille to pick up the 2 knockdown models, but instead gives the whole unit Pathfinder. He forgets that the Fenblades had a little mini feat that gives them Pathfinder, so he could have had both buffs. The Fenblades then activate, and the 2 in the front have to sacrifice their actions to stand up. The rest get charge run orders. Three of them are able to charge this inverter. One of the knockdown models can only advance now, so he advances toward the Cypher. Thanks to Pathfinder, they can ignore that rough terrain. Another Fenblade is able to charge the Cypher. 2 more are able to charge the objective. The rest run and end up like this. One of the Fenblades that charged the inverter goes first. He needs a 4 to hit. And does. He'll be rolling dice minus 7 for damage. And does no damage. The second Fenblade, he hits the inverter. He'll also be rolling dice minus 7. And this time do 2 damage. Third Fenblade hits as well, and at dice minus 7, it's able to do 9 damage. The next Fenblade auto hits the objective and will roll dice minus 6, doing 6 damage. Another auto hits, and this time does 4 damage. The last Fenblade on the objective, also rolling dice minus 6, only does 1, and now all 3 of those guys burst into flame. The last Fenblade who charged the Cypher needs a 4, but rolls Snake Eyes and misses. The Kith Car will try to finish off the objective rolling dice minus 5 for 0, but he gets a second attack, and at dice minus 5, still does 0. So the objective is still up. Doomshaper activates and casts Fortune on the unit of champions. They can re-roll their missed attack rolls now. Doomy's feat causes enemy models to suffer a d6 damage every time they spend a focus point, which is pretty devastating against Convergence. But he decides to hold off and not use his feat yet. The champions activate, and they charge. Two of them are able to charge the Mitigator. They have Relentless Charge, so they can ignore this rough terrain. Another is able to charge the Assimilator. The leader, who is parked behind an objective, is forced to run and ends up here. The first champ's charge attack against the Mitigator needs a 5. And it hits. He'll roll dice minus 5 on 4 dice because he's a weapon master, and do 6. His second attack will miss, but he can re-roll thanks to Fortune, and the re-roll hits. He'll roll dice minus 5 again, but he'll only do 2 damage. The second troll that charged this Mitigator, his charge fails too, but Fortune lets him re-roll and it hits. At dice minus 5, he'll do 8 damage. His second attack roll also hits, and this one will do 7 damage, and that will wreck the Mitigator. The champion who charged the Assimilator only needs a 4 to hit, and does. He'll roll dice minus 7, again with 4 dice because he's a weapon master. One of the dice is perfectly cocked, and we'll re-roll that. And he'll end up doing 9 damage. His second attack hits, but only ends up doing 1 damage. Nick didn't leave any room to generate any fury here. He sort of rushed from casting Fortune to then activating the champions, so he just advances these war beasts up. The champion hero activates. He also has a Relentless Charge, and he charges the Diffuser. He needs a 4 to hit, and does. He'll roll dice minus 4 for damage, and he'll do 7 damage. The bouncer activates and shifts up a little bit, and then he'll rile for 2. Then the Rune Bearer activates and just advances. Nick's infantry was predictably ineffectual against the Vectors. His Warbeast didn't participate at all, but that might be just as well because they would be synergied down next turn if they had, although he probably missed a couple good ranged attacks here. Lastly, he decided not to use his feat. We'll see how that goes. If you thought running these guys on one focus seemed complicated, try planning out an entire synergy turn and allocate focus based on that. It's quite a thinker. But first, he starts with his auto repair. Each of his damaged vectors here heals 1d3. So, While they weren't crippled, if they had been, he could bring back vital systems here. The Galvanizer looks to start the synergy chain. Each vector gets +1 to melee attack and damage rolls for every other vector that has hit an enemy model with a melee attack this turn. This one hits. He'll roll dice -2 for damage and force a tough roll. And the Fen Blade is not tough. The Corollary activates and advances toward the Inverter. He's going to power charge him up to 3. And since he spent focus doing this, he can also induct one and puts it on the Cypher. The Inverter activates. He shuffles around to get the Kithkar in his reach range. One of the Inverter's weapons has reach, the other, the POW-21, does not. He attacks the Kithkar first. With the synergy bonus, he only needs a 5 to hit. And hits. He'll roll dice +3 damage and do enough to force a tough roll. And he is not tough. He uses his Pummeler on a Fen Blade, needing a 5 to hit, but misses. He'll spend a focus to buy an additional attack, but this misses as well. He buys one more attack. This does hit. It automatically forces a tough roll that passes. He buys his last attack against the troll that hasn't been knocked down. This hits, automatically forcing a tough roll that fails. On the other side of the board, the other Inverter activates. He advances to get both troll champions in his reach. He uses the Pummeler on the nearby troll, needing a 4 with the synergy bonus, and hits. At dice +6, it'll automatically cause a tough roll. And this tough roll fails. He uses his reach weapon on the other troll, also needing a 4 to hit, and this hits. He'll roll dice +3 and force another tough roll. This time the tough roll passes. Syntherion activates next and uses his feet. He'll give all his vectors weapon platform, and then he makes a melee attack against the Fen Blade. He needs a 3 and hits. He'll automatically force a tough roll that fails. The Cypher will activate next. He'll advance up to get 2 trolls in his melee range. He'll need anything but Snake Eyes to hit these guys. The first hits and forces a tough roll that fails. His second initial attack also hits. This will force a tough roll, and this roll will fail as well. Because the feat gave him weapon platform, the Cypher can also make his ranged attack. He fires an AoE at the officer. He needs a 7 to hit and boost the attack roll. It hits. The AoE tags both the officer and the drummer behind him. They'll take POW-6 damage rolls, and Hot Shot will boost it. The officer takes 7 damage, forcing a tough roll, but he's not tough. The boosted blast damage disables the drummer too, and he misses his tough roll. The Cypher still has a focus left over, so he uses it to buy an additional ranged attack, firing a rough terrain shot at the Storm Troll. It hits. It does no damage, but it puts a circle of rough terrain around him. The Diffuser goes next. He advances around the champion here so he can get line of sight to Mulg to shoot him later. But first he tries to buff the synergy chain with the melee attack, needing not ones. It barely hits and will roll dice -4 and do 2 damage. After that melee attack, the champion gets to retaliate. He needs a 4 to hit, and does. He'll roll dice -4 for damage and do 13 damage. This cripples his ranged attack, so now even with boosting, he only gets to roll 2 dice. He needs a 6 to hit and misses, but the gun is lucky, so he gets to re-roll, and this time he hits Mulg. He'll roll dice -8 and do 3 damage, but more importantly, there's a homing beacon sticking out of Mulg now. Friendly models can now charge Mulg for free, and more importantly, get +2 movement when they do. The Assimilator acts next. Joe checks to make sure he's in his control area, so he benefits from and increases the synergy bonus. He does. He automatically hits the knocks down troll and rolls a Weapon Master damage die that easily forces a tough roll. And this tough roll passes. He uses weapon platform to fire a shot at the Storm Troll. He needs a 7 to hit, but it misses. This is an AoE 4 and it will scatter. The template lands on 2 champions. I'll roll dice -9 against both of these guys. He'll do 0 damage, and again do 0 damage. He buys a melee attack that forces a tough roll that passes. The second Galvanizer activates and advances toward the 2 champions. He makes a melee attack against the champion, boosting the attack roll, fishing for a crit. He gets the crit. This causes grievous wounds, so the subsequent damage roll will prevent them from making a tough roll, and that champion will die. He buys another attack, again boosting. He hits again, but no crit grievous this time. He rolls enough damage to force the tough roll, and the tough roll fails. The OptEffects Directive unit activates. Along with repairing guys, they can also give Pathfinder to construct models they are base to base with. So the one along the top gives Pathfinder to the Monitor. The Monitor activates and charges Mulg. He adds 2 inches to this charge thanks to the homing beacon sticking out of Mulg, and he can ignore that rough terrain thanks to the OptEffects guys. His charge attack needs not Snake Eyes to hit. And it does. With the synergy bonus, he'll be rolling dice +6, and does only 12 damage with the charge attack. He has sustained attack with this weapon, so subsequent attacks automatically hit. He buys an attack, again at +6 damage, for 10 damage. He buys an additional attack, this automatically hits, does another 12 damage, and this will destroy Mulg. Man, you do not need to roll good dice when you have synergy up to 8 stacks. He then uses weapon platform to fire at the Rune Bearer. He boosts the attack roll needing a 7, and just barely hits. It's a crit, so he rolls an extra die of damage. This easily disables the Rune Bearer, who then must make a tough roll. But he passes it. This ends Joe's brutal turn. This is a clear example of how awesome synergy is when it can stack way up like this, and Joe did a good job maximizing the various buffs he had in his faction. Nick is on the back foot now. Nick starts the maintenance phase by checking the fire on his Fen Blade, but it goes out, so that's something he has going for him. Then his Fen Blades resolve their vengeance. They move toward the Cypher. The first one swings on the Vector, needing a 4 to hit, and does. He'll roll dice -7 for damage, but do no damage. The second one auto hits the objective and will roll dice -6, doing enough to destroy it, scoring Nick a point. Then in his control phase, Doomshaper leeches into Fury to go back up to full. Now the Fen Blades get to take their normal activation, and they advance toward the Vectors. The one who's knocked down sacrifices his movement. The first one needs a 4 to hit, but he rolls Snake Eyes. The second one hits, and at dice -7, it's able to do 5 damage. Best you could do, but still pretty crappy. The next guy takes a swing. That'll hit, and at dice -7 will only do 1 damage. The champion hero goes next. He advances as close as he can to get Syntherion into his reach, and he just barely does. He then uses his Thresher attack, where he can make a melee attack against everyone in his melee reach. He starts with a Diffuser, who had only 1 box left. He needs a 4 to hit, and does. He'll roll dice -4, and is able to wreck him. Then he resolves the Thresher attacks on the OptEffects Directive. He'll need 5s to hit these guys. The first does, and auto kills him. And the second hit, and auto kills him. He needs a 5 to hit Syntherion, and does. He'll be rolling dice -6 on this dude, and does 9 damage to the caster. Woo! The last champion goes next and makes an attack against the Assimilator. He needs a 4 and hits. He'll be rolling dice -7 for damage, and will only do 1 damage. He gets to make a second attack. This one also hits, and at dice -7, he'll do 3 damage. It's Doomshaper's turn to go next, but oh wait a minute, we forgot to do a morale check for those OptEffects guys, so we rush over and do it and they're fine. Probably missed another one too back when the Fen Blades were getting killed, but who cares. Now Doomshaper goes for real, and he advances a little further into the zone. He then casts the Pyre Troll's Animus, Flaming Fist, on the Pyre Troll. This will give him +2 strength and critical fire. He casts it again, this time on the Storm Troll. Doomshaper then forgets to use his feat, and the Storm Troll activates. He walks toward the Monitor and takes a couple punches at him. He's only at 5, so he needs a 5 to hit. And he hits with an 8. Even with the buff, he's at dice -5 for damage and does 4 damage. His second swing misses. It's hard to miss these guys. He buys a melee attack that hits and only does 2 damage. He buys another attack that hits, but at dice -5 does 0 damage. His last attack hits, and this time is able to do 6 damage. A good roll, but Nick doesn't really have any models left on the table that can crack these heavy. The Pirate Troll activates and charges a Galvanizer. He'll need a 7 to hit. The charge attack misses. He then gets to make his second initial attack. This misses as well. He buys a melee attack that just barely hits. At dice -2, it'll do 3 damage. He buys an attack that hits with a crit, though we forget about the crit fire, and it does 5 damage. These light trolls are built for ranged attacks, and even with Flaming Fist, they can't do it in melee. Fellcaller walks up, and he uses his spray attack against Syntherion. The template will clip the Cipher as well. He rolls that attack roll first, and it hits. At dice -7, it'll do no damage. He rolls against Syntherion, needing a 7 to hit, and does. This will roll dice -6 damage, but only do 1. The Bouncer activates, he advances toward the monitor. He'll try hitting him. He's pretty wimpy too, but we'll see what happens. He needs a 5. His first attack hits. He'll roll dice -6 for damage though, and do 0 damage. Nick's turn ends pretty lamely. He can't crack this armor, and should have dedicated his entire turn to an assassination. Maybe the Storm and Pirate Trolls could have finished off Syntherion with ranged attacks. Joe's going to start by setting up some more stacks of synergy. We can fast forward the part where he and his jacks on the lower part clean up those trolls, and end up like this. Syntherion himself then activates and advances toward the champion. With 3 stacks of synergy, he needs not ones to hit. He hits. He'll roll dice +1 for damage, surprisingly good. He does enough to force a tough roll, and this roll fails. The Corollary goes next, and advances up to do his thing. He'll power transfer 3 to the Inverter, which lets him induct another one to the Galvanizer. The Inverter then activates, he advances toward the remaining champion and the Pirate Troll. He uses his reach weapon on the champion, needing not ones to hit, but rolls ones. He uses the Pummeler on the Pirate Troll, hits, and knocks him down. At dice +8, the Troll takes 12. He then buys an additional attack against the champion. This attack hits, automatically forcing a tough roll that fails. He then buys an attack that automatically hits the knockdown Pirate Troll, doing enough damage to destroy it. The Optifex Directive guys activate. They give the Galvanizer Pathfinder. Then the Galvanizer activates and charges the Bouncer. He'll need not ones to hit him, and does. He'll roll dice -2 and do 8 damage. He buys another attack. This one hits, and at dice -2 does 4. One last attack. This one hits, and this time does 9 damage, leaving him with 1 box. The Assimilator will activate next and fire his ranged attack at Doomshaper. He'll boost it, needing an 8. This'll hit. He'll boost the damage roll at dice -2 and do 11 damage, leaving 5 on the caster. Then the monitor goes, he was disrupted by the Storm Troll, so he can't use focus. He makes his initial attack that hits. He'll roll dice +7 for damage, doing 12 and leaving the Storm Troll with 2 boxes. Joe ends his turn in complete control. He wasn't able to kill Doomshaper this time, but he left his War Beasts on 1 and 2 boxes respectively. Nick will be forced to try some Hail Mary assassination next turn. The Rune Bearer activates first. He can cast one of Doomy's spells once per game, so he's going to throw a Stranglehold over at Syntherion and hope for crazy good dice. Syntherion's in a wreck marker, so that gives him cover. The Rune Shaper's going to need a 10 to hit. And the attack misses. Then it's Doomshaper's turn to throw out Strangleholds. He can advance like this, and just gets within range of Syntherion. He'll also need a 10 to hit. He's going to boost his first attack roll. And it hits. He'll be rolling dice -10 for damage, as Syntherion is camping 3 focus, and does 0 damage with the first Stranglehold. He can't afford to boost attack rolls anymore, so he needs to hard roll a 10, but can't. And that ends his assassination attempt. During his control phase, Syntherion sets up to finish off Doomshaper. Of course, he'll plan to activate with other models and punch other trolls to build up synergy stack so that when he finally starts punching Doomshaper, he'll get a bunch of bonuses. Let's rapid fire fast forward through a bunch of dead trolls. This guy and that guy and then this guy also. Then the Assimilator makes his ranged attack against Doomshaper. He boosts the attack roll, and it hits. And even without boosting, he's able to do enough damage to force a tough roll. And this tough roll fails, and Doomshaper dies, so all those synergy stacks wasted. And with that, the game ends, a game that Joe really had under control from the beginning. This was a good example of a well-run synergy army in action. His one big feat turn, the turn where he ended his synergy chain by charging and killing Nick's best model, Mulg, took a great deal of planning and forward thinking to execute. But by pulling it off, he effectively locked the game away. Nick can be excused for forgetting some of the rules here, as he hasn't played his trolls in a long time. It wasn't clear to him until the game was well underway that he just didn't have the tools in his army to crack all this armor. He would never have won this fight just walking into the middle and trading blows. That wasn't going to happen. If he had it to do all over again, he would have been better off setting up an assassination right from deployment. He probably needed to catch Syntherion on the turn after he used his feat, hopefully camping zero focus, pump ranged attacks from both of his light war beasts into him, plus a stranglehold or two. That coupled with the potential damage he might have received by using his feat, and Doomy might have been able to pull it off. Playing when you're at a disadvantage isn't that bad if you know you're at that disadvantage right from deployment. Since Nick wasn't quite sure how this would go down until it already went down, he didn't really have a chance. Thank you for watching. For more battle reports, articles, and guides, check out Gearwig.com. You can email me at boss@gearwig.com, or check out our Facebook or Twitter pages. If you want to help the site, tell a friend and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.